Wait, what does your shirt say? Free who? Free what?
It's soccer stuff. Free
Oh.
Matt Meowsgo. He got suspended. No big deal. Yo! What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 74 of Office Hours. Actually, our first one of the brand new year.
Yep.
Um, I'm Big Stowe. We got Nora over there. Nora, how we doing?
I'm freezing, but I'm it's so cold, but I'm here and I'm excited to talk about today's topic. Um, I'm glad I missed us. I'm glad Office Hours is back. We've done like Twitter, we've been on Instagram, um, but we're here and today we're talking about working with your friends, which is great until it isn't. And then it's really, really, really shitty. So hopefully Stowe and I today can give you some tips, some things to avoid, some best practices, some things to think about, so that when you do work with your friends, it ends in success and loving each other more and not breaking up your friendships. How you doing, Stowe?
Right, absolutely. Doing good, doing good. Excited for this one too. Of course, usual YouTube stuff. You can leave a like if you like what you're hearing today. If you have whether it's in the music industry or otherwise, if you've worked with your friends before, and um, regardless of which way that experience went, put it in the chat, put it in the comments. Honestly, it's a common. I feel like it's something that's common that happens in the creative industry, but not something that's always talked about. So um, I think this pairs well with some of the other episodes that we've done, and we'll discuss that here in a bit. But yeah, work with your friends, episode 74. Excited about it.
Yeah. I think it's really natural, like in music, like creative things in general, but music especially, because you work with the people closest to you and who's closest to you, but your friends. And I think a lot of this will actually also apply to family. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but you're working with the people closest to you, right? So what do you and your friends do? You make music together, you create together, you work on things together, and so it's like there's something there about proximity and access and trust where you're like, yeah, of course I'm going to work with my friends. And when it works great, it can be beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't always work great. And I think um so yeah, I don't know, I feel like the benefits of it is really obvious.
Right.
And so what we want to talk about today is like, what are some of the things to watch out for? And I think the most important thing is when you work with your friends, you always have the best intentions, which
Exactly.
you absolutely should. And you should still also, and I hope if you take nothing else away from today's conversation, take this away, you should prepare for the absolute worst. And it doesn't mean that you don't trust your friends. It doesn't mean it's like having a prenup, right? It doesn't mean you think you're going to get a divorce. It doesn't mean you're going to, like, you're ready to sabotage things. But if for whatever reason things fall apart, you have already talked about the things that you should do. So even Stowe and I, um, we're friends. We've worked together for a long, long time, and we have regular conversations about how is the distribution of labor happening. We have agreements about ownership and money and things like that, and we continue to check in, not because I think Stowe is going to screw me over or Stowe thinks I'm going to screw him over, but because it makes sure that we're on the same page about all the things. And so rule number one of working with your friends is to talk about all the things. Talk about money, talk about ownership, talk about how you're going to make decisions. In like technical terms, I would tell you have a partnership agreement. But if you cannot talk about these things, if you can't sit there and be like, yo, what happens if you steal from me? What do we do? And you can't even entertain that conversation. If you can't talk about the potential challenges, that's probably a signal that you maybe aren't ready to work together yet. So that's honestly like first and foremost, talk about the difficult things and then put it in writing and then revisit those conversations as you need to.
And to be clear, like we're not saying like don't work with your friends. They're definitely going to screw you over at some point and all this other stuff. But a lot of this stuff are things that have to be discussed. Like even when we talk about on the most basic level, like even before we start talking about money, before we even start talking about, what happens if one person gets signed and the other person doesn't and all that type of stuff. It really, on the most basic level, is like, can we actually work together and tackle all the discussions and conversations that need to happen in a collaboration? I think sometimes,
Yeah.
and listen, I'm guilty of this too, like in some cases where it's like, you're comfortable working with your friends. So you let your guard down, right? And you're not, especially if you're really that close, like you're not always thinking about, okay, well, if this not even conflict, it's not even like, oh no, like what if this big dramatic problem happens? It's literally on some basic stuff like, well, what if you go to another state, or what if you get a show and I don't, or it's just all this stuff that can happen where if you don't discuss it beforehand, when it comes up and people start making the decisions that are best for themselves, now the friendship is kind of, there's tension in the friendship and there's things at play because you didn't discuss things beforehand. You don't want to discuss things as they're coming up. You want to have a plan so that when it comes up, you're like, oh yeah, boom, we already talked about this beforehand, so let's do what we talked about. And if we disagree, let's discuss that, versus everyone's making their own decisions and some people feel one way, some people feel another way, and now there's just all this conflict brewing beneath the surface, and then it just erupts like a volcano and now everybody's mad.
Yeah, and I think it's, oh wait, what was I going to say? I just lost my train of thought.
Yeah, my bad. I was rambling.
No, you weren't rambling. I think it's important. Yeah, I mean, just to reiterate what you said. Dang, I really just went blank right now. To reiterate what you said about being prepared, and not because it might be bad things, but it might be good things. Your friend might get married, have kids, change careers. Like these are all things I've seen. And so, oh, this is what I was going to say, is that if you've already done the work before these things happen, you don't have to make decisions when emotions are high or you're in a moment of crisis or there's a lot of pressure. And so you make better decisions from that point of clarity beforehand. And so not only are you able to preserve the relationship, hopefully you're making better decisions. So that's the first thing, y'all. Like if you are going to work with your friends, talk about it. Talk about all the things. Make sure you all have the same goals. Like maybe you want to be famous, but your friend just wants to make music for fun and you decide to work together. Well, you're not even working in the same direction. And so talking about it is really, really important. And talking about, sorry, I'm like a little distracted. Talking about the potential problems, talking about how you're going to work together, talking about what you want, but also talking about what you would like your collaborative process to be like. Do you want to, like, how frequently are you going to meet? Who's going to lead your meetings? Or are you just going to get together and have fun? Like,
exactly, yeah.
It's going to be like, because if one of you is like, let's meet every week, business meetings, take notes, agendas, receipts, and then the other one of you is like, it'll happen, it's cool. Not that one way is better than the other, but it's going to create resentment and discord between you. And so again, talk about those things and have a plan, because even though that's your friend, you want to treat it with the same structure that you would treat any other working relationship.
Because that's, I mean, again, even if you both have the same goals, like the whole point is to like take the journey together and whatnot, right? And so if both of you, especially again, as with a friendship component being part of that, aren't on the same page, you're almost like asking for some type of trouble, just because, again, like, and again, we're not saying you have to, investigate every minute detail. It's very difficult to like do all of that. But if you have a general kind of standing of, hey, if XYZ comes up, we're going to at minimum discuss what's happening. That's way better than just being like, hey, you're my buddy, I'm your buddy, let's make music and let's see what happens. Because then that's just, again, there's just too many variables at play at that point.
So it's also like making sure that the way you work together, there's some difference between how you work together and how you're friends together. So there's some really simple things that you could do to protect both, right? Like boundaries is key. And if you're if you enter a business relationship and all you do is talk about business and you forget that you're friends, that can lead problems. Or if all you do is be friends and don't. So one is really having clear boundaries about, and this, we have a whole episode on like dating a creative. This comes up in that dating a creative thing too episode also. But like set boundaries with each other.
Sorry, my hair's just, it's really fucking with me today. I'm so sorry.
No, you're good. It's a lot of pressure to be on camera. I'm always like, oh my God. Anyways, I get it.
Right.
Setting boundaries or creating time to be friends and creating time to be coworkers is really important, right? Like there's a magic in your friendship that will allow you to work really well together and collaborate because you trust each other. You can take risks, you can do all the beautiful stuff, and that's great. But that's built on the fact that y'all are friends, that you know each other, you trust each other, you adventure together. So remembering that if you do too much of one or the other, it'll unbalance the situation. So, like some of you might have heard me tell this story before, but I used to manage an artist that I was also dating. And I used to pick up the phone and call him. And I'd be like, all right, I'm calling you as your manager. And we'd have a whole conversation. And then I'd hang up. And then I'd call him back and be like, okay, now I'm calling you as your girlfriend. And sometimes we would talk about the same thing, but it was two very different conversations. And that helped us separate one from the other. I'm not saying y'all have to do that with your friends, but find the thing it works. And it might say, okay, after 6:00, we don't talk about business, or on weekends, or if we're out, like whatever that is, but setting those boundaries so there's space for you to be friends and protect the friendship, and space for you to be coworkers and colleagues and collaborators and protect that division is really, really helpful. The other thing that can be really helpful is when you do start to work together, then have some kind of ritual or process or something that brings you into the workspace. So it might be you come up with like every meeting you set the intention together, or every meeting you're like, look, these are our agreements about how we want to work together. Let's review the agreements so that you're setting the space of these. This is what's a good metaphor, y'all? It's like you want to create a container for the work to happen in, and you treat that with intent. And so that way you could be hanging out and being like, all right, now it's meeting time. And
Right.
you have something, right? It might be like going over the agenda, or it might be going over the agreements, or it might be doing check-ins that creates a transition from like friendship to collaborative space. And that helps because it allows you to create those boundaries. So if you're like mad at each other, or if some stuff is going on, it doesn't carry into the work stuff, and vice versa. That if there's like tension at work, it doesn't carry into the friendship stuff. So long story short, boundaries is key.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And as we hit halftime, excuse me, we appreciate everybody that's, whether you're watching this in the future or you're watching this live with us, we appreciate you coming through. Leave a like if you could. It really helps us get in front of more people. We have our Cash App actually in the live chat, and it's actually down below in the description too. If you like what you hear, can throw a dollar or two, that helps us out, or $500, that helps as well. I wanted, we talked about this actually a little bit in some of our previous episodes. We have one on negotiations, we have one on contracts, and they kind of, I feel like, intertwine with stuff like this. And you mentioned the partnership agreement stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like when we start talking about contracts and we start talking about partnership agreements, I feel like there's always this negative connotation around that, when it really doesn't have to be that. So why does that conversation not necessarily have to be a negative one, and why is it still important to have those conversations regardless?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so much like anxiety. Maybe it's because we're unfamiliar, or maybe it's because it's like a contract and we think lawyer, like, I don't know, like it's, for most of us, it's not something we're familiar with, right? So like that in and of itself makes it big and scary and like foreign, to use that word. But really all it's saying is, look, do we have the same intention, vision, goal? Like, are we on the same page about this? That's
Right.
all it is. And then it's saying, okay, here's what we've agreed to. And not because again, like I was saying earlier, like not because we're going to screw each other over, but we might forget, right? If you're working together for a while, you might forget that like 6 years ago, you all decided that such and such would be a deal breaker. Or I don't know, like I can't even think of examples, but it's about creating a common place to have these conversations about. And ideally, you're not going to like sue each other. You're not going to take each other to court. You might.
If it comes to that, right. And I think that's what we're saying, right? Like it doesn't have to be this win, lose, victory type deal, right?
Right. It's like I want to succeed, you want to succeed, and here's how we want to succeed together. I mean, and that's the thing is like, it's really that simple. And again, like, as I was saying earlier, if you find like in this kind of stuff, process is really important, right? So if you're having a hard time talking about these things with your partner, maybe it's not right. Like if you can't disagree with each other, if you don't feel safe, like not agreeing with them, or if you don't feel safe challenging their opinions, or if, right, like that's all information for you all to decide if this is a good step for your relationship to take or not. A lot of it as I talk, I'm like, oh, this sounds like having a healthy this will apply to all healthy relationships. But in the collaborative creative sense, it's very, these are some like specific things around that.
Right. And like, damn, I lost my train of thought too. Simply in saying that, like, this is something, okay, that's what I was going to say, is that the friendship, even if like working together isn't the best thing for you guys, does not necessarily mean that the friendship is over. Like I feel like I've seen situations where it's like, the business side didn't work, and then it just kind of explodes almost. And it's this, and I get that sometimes, I guess, because there's a lot on the line, I suppose. And, when it comes to creativity, we all take our own creativity very personally and stuff like that. But it does pain me sometimes to see like the most basic of like negotiations, conversations go left and then just absolutely destroy the friendship.
I've had it both ways. I've worked with people where separating, like not working together anymore, was actually the best thing for our friendship.
Exactly. Right.
And because we had talked about some of these things previously, we were able to like, shut down and go our separate ways and still be friends. And it was great. I've had situations where initially the breakup was very hard. The creative breakup was really hard. I had one situation where it properly felt like a divorce. Like,
right.
Like it was tough, but now today it's better for all of us. Mm-hmm. And then to be really honest with y'all, like I've also had situations where in seeing how somebody works, because you see a different side of them. Like you really have to be ready for, do you want to see a different side of them? And so I've had situations where I've worked with someone and saw a lot of things about them that I hadn't seen before, that I didn't like, and lost all respect for them and was like, I don't ever want to have anything to do with you ever
again. Right.
Which in some ways, yes, is sad, but also like gave me a clarity. So it invites, I think, a degree of unpredictability into the relationship that you also have to be ready for. Because it changes the dynamic. It's like
exactly, yeah.
It changes the dynamic, right? Like, and there's so many things that I think in collaborate, especially if you're doing like business and money gets involved or credit gets involved or publicity, and like people's insecurities come up, people's egos come up, people's own trauma. Like it might not even have anything to do with you. I've worked in one situation where like the person I was working with, all their trauma came up and it had nothing to do with me, but it completely interrupted the way that we were working together. So there's a lot that, and again, this is another reason why talking about as much as possible upfront and putting it on paper, and because there's so much that you don't know. So planning for what you do know will help make it easier when the unknowns come up. But yeah, like for real, you have to be ready for best case scenario, and you have to be ready for worst case scenario. And sometimes that means your friendship, it might change.
Mm-hmm. And that's why these discussions are just so important. Like it's like in the moment when you're thinking, like we've all been in the situation where we're like, oh my goodness, like we should do a song together, or we should do this together, we should do that together. We've all been in those situations before. But once it starts to become like an actual thing, like it really only helps to sit down and actually talk about what it looks like for both parties involved, because the other part that with stuff like this is expectations, and people's expectations can be all over the place. And so if you don't discuss where your head's at and they don't discuss where they're at, it's almost inevitable that at some point there's going to be a clash, and you just want to be prepared for that. I don't want, like, we're not trying to make this be this like doom and gloom. And I feel like, again, whether it's contracts, negotiations, or whatever, like there's always this connotation of like there's a winner and there's a loser, and it's just with in working in friendship, it doesn't have to be like that. And so if you're able to discuss, and again, that doesn't mean necessarily that that there's not going to be disagreements, that there's not going to be conflict or whatever, but with partnership agreements and discussions, now you have kind of almost a plan set in place for when that stuff does come up. So now, like Nora said, when emotions are high and people are in fight or flight, and unknowns are coming into the picture and stuff like that. Now, instead of we're just going in, gung ho, hold up, let's fall back for a second. We have a plan right here that says exactly what we're supposed to do when stuff like this happens. So let's take a beat, and then let's figure out what we're going to do. And so I think that just helps in the long run.
Yeah, and you mentioned like expectations. I think the two biggest places that I've seen friendships fall apart, or businesses that where friendships fall apart, is in roles and responsibilities. That someone feels like, I'm doing more, you're not doing enough, I'm carrying all the weight. So like distribution of labor. No, let me say the three biggest. Distribution of labor and work. Second being money. You're stealing, you're not putting in enough money, I'm putting all the money, you're not, it's not 50-50. And that's like, set up a whatever financial system works for you. Make sure everybody has access. Like transparency is going to be key. Don't be afraid to audit. Like keep your receipts. Just organization fixes that. Organization and transparency fixes.
And like, to be clear, we do that here.
Yeah, 100%. So like right now, right? Like all the money goes to me, right? Like if you're cash apping, you're Venmoing, we always say, give it to Nora's account, right office hours. And then Sto and I go over and look at like we have records that we both have access to. I send him screenshots or I give him updates. Like, and so, and we've talked about like when we did the Patreon, like Sto was going to do some stuff. We talk about this stuff very explicitly. And so money is a huge place where people fight. And so the more you can build in transparency, and if you're not comfortable talking about money with someone, you shouldn't work with them. Like I'm a real believer in that. If you're afraid to be like, oh, you owe me this, or you didn't do this. Like, so roles and responsibilities, money. And then the third piece is around like ego and attention. So what happens if Sto gets all the attention and everyone ignores me, and Sto starts thinking it's Sto's office hours? And we see this, right? We see this with bands and musicians all the time, where like they're a group and then someone thinks that they're like the star. And so being able to have these conversations, and honestly, it's also being honest with yourself about what you want. Because it's okay if you're part of a team and you decide you want to be the star, but then you have to be honest with yourself and you have to be honest with your team about that. And then you all can navigate what that looks like, right? It doesn't. So those are the, and shout out to folks who are joining us. Y'all are, Daryl says 1,000%. Serial Census says, ouch, I'm late, but y'all are always on time and can go back and watch the episode. But those are the three areas, right? And so if you can plan ahead and prepare, and again, like I feel like we're repeating, but it's really that simple. It's really that simple to like be honest with yourself, be honest with your partners, talk about it, put it on paper, and be as transparent as possible. Like the more you have systems in place, shared, like, does everybody have access to the email or only one of you has access to the email? Talk about like, is it okay to promote myself on our team's social media? Or is it like just a little, like, just talk about it. Sandroid says this is super relatable. Because again, I think it's one of those things that we so often, okay, here's the last thing I say, because we so often want to work with our friends. I think it's also okay to do it in small pieces and get it, like work on one project. And then if
Right,
that,
you don't have to do the whole LLC offer.
right, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Like see what it's like, do a little test drives, try a little mini project, and then scale if you feel comfortable. Because it's like I said, and like we've been saying, it introduces so many unknowns and you can plan for so much. But at the end of the day, like it's a whole side of people that you might not have been prepared for or didn't know.
And again, like that's not like an inherently bad thing. I just want to close on like everything that we talk about here specifically in this episode. Like Nora and I have genuinely gone through as, you know, partners for office hours. Like we've had our own conflict stuff like come up and stuff like that, and our own disagreements and whatnot. And it legitimately like helped us to go back to our roots, to where we started, just to figure out like making sure that we're tackling our parts of the agreements that we, it's money stuff, audit stuff, like we do that here. And it's not like, I don't know. Again, I just always feel like there's this connotation of like, we're negotiating. I have to make sure I get the upper hand. Like it doesn't have to be that. And if you're working with a friend, it shouldn't have to be that. So
let me say one last thing, because I think like, yeah. And again, pulling from us, I think like Sto and I mean, y'all know the story. We met on the internet. We became internet buddies. We met in real life. I peer pressured him. We didn't really, like when we started office hours, we didn't really like know each other like that. And we've become friends, I think, and we've become really, really good friends through office hours. And so there's a process in like group dynamics where it talks about like you form and then you set norms. And then there's a stage of that they call storming. And that's when you have conflict. And it's actually a really necessary and healthy part of any kind of group dynamic. Because if we can be in conflict with each other and work through it, it increases trust. It increases our like comfort in taking risk with each other. And so I know, and Sto and I have been through that. Like we went through something last year and it was not fun. And like Sto said, it really brought us closer together as friends, closer together. Like it's, the outcome has been better. And so I understand that with friends or with family, when you're working with people that you care about, when you care about the relationship, sometimes conflict can be really scary. And so where I just want to leave you all with like, lean into the conflict. Right? Like if you can work through that, it will take you to a better place. You can't, walking on eggshells doesn't serve the relationship, doesn't serve the business, doesn't serve the creativity. And so if you can work with people that you can have healthy, right? Like I don't want you to always be in a state of anxiety and like beefing with each other. But if together you create a space where you can disagree and you can, you know, that's okay and that's healthy, and hopefully you feel secure enough in the friendship to know that like we can disagree but we still like each other. We can disagree but it's not personal. I worked on a project once where one of the first things that the guy said to me was, look, nothing is precious. And I love that because it created space for us to be like, yo, I can critique your ideas, you can critique mine, we can break it down and recreate it, and it's not personal. And so when you're working with things that feel so emotional to you, it's creative and it's your friends, that's like emotion exponential. Um,
Right.
remembering that like it's about the project, it's about the goals you set, it's about the outcome you want to get, it's about liking each other is just as important, right? The relationship is just as important as how we did it, as did we do the thing we were going to do. You can decide what success looks like for all of you, right? And leaning into conflict will get you there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. This was a good one. Again, we're very big on the get a websites, get a newsletters and stuff like that. But this stuff is just as important, especially as so many of you are continuing to ascend in your careers and stuff like that, regardless of whether it's, music. I don't care if you're flipping pancakes. I don't care if you're doing law stuff, community work, et cetera, et cetera. Like all of this, this part is important. And again, we have other episodes about negotiations, about contracts. I have to look. I think there's like another one I'm missing, but like stuff that is about the kind of the personal work that we're doing with each other as we're working together, and that stuff's important because again, that there's what the hell is the point of succeeding if you don't have your friends coming along with you?
Well,
So,
especially in music, like we say, right?
mm-hmm.
Music, it's all about the human touch. It's like emotional. It's about the person. Networking is everything. Relationships are key. So you should work with your friends. You should work with people you know. And I think we have an episode on networking also. So we should make a playlist of like relationship stuff. But like, we talk a lot about cross-pollination and collaborating and connect, take 3 of your friends and go on show, or like we talk about this so much in office hours. And so we just want to give you some tools and support in how to do that in a way that works for everybody, where there's win, 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 rather than this win-lose that Sto has been talking about. So don't freak out, work with your friends, just talk about it, have a contract, be honest, be transparent, prepare for the worst, but expect the best, and take care of yourself in the meantime, because you matter. And we appreciate you for being here and supporting office hours. And click the link, do the like, subscribe, share this with a friend. But like, I would love to hear your stories in the comments about what went well, what didn't go well, what's worked for you when you've worked for your friends, because this is also how we learn from each other. So sharing is caring.
Yeah, leave that like, leave a comment, let us know. In 2 weeks, we'll be talking about toxic fandoms, so that should be fun given a lot of what's been going on the last couple months. And yeah, get some rest, drink some water, get a stretch in, okay?
Stay
and
warm.
we'll be back soon.
It's cold, rainy, and snowy all over, so stay warm.
And we'll be back soon, all right? Thanks for joining us. Peace.